your host, Dennis Horvitz, the David Letterman of the Hopelessly Damned. We are doing another in a series of interviews and discussions with Dr. Darrel W. Ray, who is the author of this book, The God Virus, How Religion Infects Our Lives and Culture. And he has given a presentation at one of our New York City Atheists monthly meetings, and hopefully we will have you will come back again the next time we're in the area, because
I'd love to.
What we're going, in fact, what part of what the show is going to be about is at least trying to touch upon some of the areas that we didn't have a chance to discuss, at the meeting, basically, but just to give you a little background, Dr. Ray grew up in Wichita, Kansas, which is, of course, the heart of the Bible Belt, and which he informs me, I guess, at one time was quite progressive compared to the rest of the country. He is the grandson of a country preacher and the child of Christian missionaries. He expected to go into the ministry himself, and then, I guess, after he got his master's degree in religion, he lost his faith, which is not necessarily uncommon. Instead, he got a doctorate in clinical psychology from Vanderbilt University, and he is now a successful practicing psychologist.
Actually, it was a degree in counseling psychology.
Counseling
right.
psychology, and he wrote of course, the book The God Virus, and which kind of expands upon Richard Dawkins' idea of a kind of a cultural meme in the way it's spread, and Dr. Darrel Ray deals with religion and the spreading of religion as though it was a virus, and it makes a lot of sense. And I guess one thing we should mention, and that you mentioned, is that I guess the difficulty in combating certainly religious fundamentalism is that it's really not about facts at all.
No.
And I mean, when I got into this discussion myself many years ago, I began to realize that it's entirely a piece.
Right.
And in your book, The God Virus, you describe the various ways that occurs.
Right. Yeah.
I guess you mentioned that some of the mechanisms behind why. I guess specifically fundamentalists deny science and religion, but do you find there are varying degrees that certain religions or certain religious groups are worse than others?
Well, I think fundamentalism across the board is pretty anti-science.
Right.
No matter whether it's Hindu fundamentalism
Right.
or Muslim or Christian fundamentalism.
Right. So in other words, this book itself is not necessarily dealing strictly with fundamentalism.
Not at all. Any kind of religion. Any kind.
It's just generally the way it's spread, and
Right.
I guess there are two kinds: the vertical and the horizontal.
Well, the way it infects, the vertical and the horizontal.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Horizontal being the missionary approach to spreading religion, just like viruses, colds are spread. If I cough and you get the virus, that would be a horizontal approach.
So proselytizing would be
right, proselytizing. Whereas a vertical approach is when I give it to my children.
Right.
Just like I could, through birth, give a disease. A woman could give HIV to her child. That would be a vertical. She's giving being a Baptist fundamentalist or a Muslim to her child.
Right. So yeah. In other words, that many people who are absolutely convinced that Jesus Christ is their Savior
Right.
are convinced simply because they weren't born Hindus.
Precisely. Right. That's all. That's all they know. And they would be just as convinced if they were born a Hindu.
Yes. Yeah. So, bearing in mind that, well, I've talked to different people and read different positions on this. People like Richard Dawkins will not get into a discussion because he feels that even by getting into discussion that he's granting the opposition a certain amount of legitimacy.
Right.
On the other hand, I've talked to other people who do get in these discussions, because along that very idealistic standpoint, if I can convince just one person, or if I can get one person to question, and sometimes that does bear fruit. By and large, it's about emotional hotspots. And
It is, and one of the emotional hotspots, I think, for we who are non-theists, is why do we want to go out and proselytize and convert?
Right.
I'm really not interested in converting
Right.
people. I'm interested in giving information if they want it.
Right.
I'm interested in providing a safe place for us to have a discussion.
Yeah, but here's the thing. And of course, atheists are, amongst other things, have been accused of being aloof and arrogant, and that's probably not true, except in my case it is. One of the reasons I wouldn't proselytize, I just don't want to lower myself to do it. I mean, I don't got to explain nothing. You can't figure it out yourself. But that's just me. But the point I'm trying to make is that, while I certainly don't want to, not interested in proselytizing, and other people are not interested in proselytizing, you do have to confront the fact that there is a fundamentalist movement to impose religion in government.
Absolutely right.
And that fighting that is not proselytization. That is making the government obey its own laws.
It's standing up for your own rights. Exactly.
That's right. And
I have the right to send my child to a school that teaches science, not
Right.
some biblical version of creation.
Right. So that I wouldn't call that wouldn't certainly be. That would not be proselytizing.
No, not at all. Although they may perceive it as that.
Right.
And if I get in an argument with a school board about, I want science taught in biology and I want real, true genetics taught there, not your crazy ideas about intelligent design.
Which reminds me. You mentioned before, of course, being from Kansas, and we discussed. I think on the other show, some of the problems with the Kansas school board. Were you in any way involved in
Oh, no, I wasn't, but I was a big supporter of Bobby Henderson, who single-handedly took on the Kansas school board.
Right.
I think it was at Oregon in graduate school at the time. That's an amazing thing that he came up with this creating flying spaghetti monster idea.
Yeah.
And forced the Kansas school board to back down.
Right.
And he's since done it. It's also happened now, I think, in 2 different school boards in Florida now, and some other school boards probably I'm not aware of. But yeah, I wish I had, but I've been a big supporter of him, and I've thanked him many times for what he did for Kansas.
And the name escapes me. The name of the Republican, the woman who is the Republican, I believe, who also supported the teaching of evolution.
I don't recall her name.
I'm really sorry, because
she deserves recognition.
She certainly does deserve recognition. Now, going back to the idea of the God virus and thinking of it in terms of being spread by vectors. Of course, one of the main vectors is the priesthood.
Right.
Ministerial rabbis, ministers, priests,
Right.
imams. I've read that to some degree the priesthood is kind of imprisoned by its own priestcraft. In other words, certain people in our position say, for instance, certainly disagree with all the policies of the Vatican regarding women's rights and the spread of HIV, but by the same token, there are clearly have been signs of even within the Vatican and in the College of Cardinals, more liberal points of view, but they kind of can't do anything.
Right.
Because not just from the power structure of the church itself, but the fact is they've conditioned the people to think in a certain way for so long that if they make any kind of drastic adjustments, the church is going to lose out.
Right.
So they're kind of damned if they do, because the church is losing because people think that a lot of Catholics, for instance, think that their positions are backward, and yet if anyone makes a sincere attempt to adjust that within the church, they're going to lose.
True, that's true.
People, for exactly the opposite reason.
And if you look in the United States, the Catholic Church is having a good deal of trouble surviving in many ways.
Yes.
And it's a largely, 90% of the Catholics practice birth control.
Right.
So, that's a pretty
And
big,
marry non-Catholics.
Yeah, and marry non-Catholics, among other things, right?
Yeah.
So the Catholic Church is having to dance fast to try and find new ways to keep the organization together, especially in light of all the pedophile issues with Catholic priests.
Right, and of course, and as you go, you mentioned that in your book, The God Virus, that it's the most important thing, of course, is preserving the virus.
Right.
So
right.
if you have to choose between between getting rid of a pedophile priest,
Right.
or which would damage the reputation of the church,
right.
and
well, if you think the way the virus works is it always programs you, the priest or the parishioner, it doesn't matter, that the most important thing is the virus,
Right.
not you.
Right.
So you get a priest who's willing to do things that self-sacrifice, like celibacy.
Right.
That's pretty big self-sacrifice, not to reproduce yourself genetically.
Right.
So that's how strong the God virus is, that it can overcome natural genetic biological instincts.
yeah.
I mean, there's not much that's more powerful than that. I don't think in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and if it comes down to that, and basically what happened was that the church, has had a choice, and they chose themselves over the victims.
Absolutely, right.
And I want to point out too, people, because it's become so notorious, people have been harping on the Catholic Church about the pedophile thing. But the pedophile issue with clergymen is not confined to the Catholic Church.
No, there's an entire website called StopBaptistMinisters.org, I think is what it was, and it was started as a result of Baptist people saying, "Oh, look, it's not just the Catholics that got the problem. We got Baptist ministers that are."
And actually there has, even in the ultra Orthodox Jewish community, there has been, it's starting to come out now. But in all cases, these things have been covered up and pushed aside for the same reason that the church was covering it up and pushing it aside.
Right.
Because it was more important to preserve the virus and the vector. And as you said in your lecture, the vectors are expensive to...
They are. And you've got years and years of training in a Catholic priest. Or in case of Protestants, you've got these big megachurch ministers who are bringing millions of dollars and thousands of people in.
Right.
If they start messing around, screwing the choir director or something, you just don't get rid of them too easily.
Right. And that, I'm sure that's and that's true in, I guess, in all religions and all levels.
Right. It's a parasite, and a parasite is number one concerned with its survival, not your survival.
Sure.
The parasite, the malaria parasite, will eventually kill you.
Yes.
But it's not concerned about you. It's concerned about how do I get from you to my next host.
Right.
And it just goes from host to host to host.
Right.
And that's how it propagates. The same thing for religion. It doesn't really care about any of the individuals in the religion.
That's right.
So that means individuals will die for their religion, and they have. I mean, look at all the martyrs that you've got, and people uplift the martyrs, starting with Jesus himself. Well, for the Christians, but you have martyrs in the Jewish religion as well.
Of course.
Maccabees, Judas Maccabees.
Right, they're in the Jewish religion as well, and the thing is that it's because of the very nature of the virus itself that it never occurs to people, why would a God who could poof the universe into existence need to be reduced to requiring martyrs of any kind?
Yeah.
Why would there's this great book which kind of was one of my first kind of formal textbook into atheism. Is The Case Against God by, was it George F. Smith? And he goes on, he mentions things such as how things in the Bible are so contrived. Why would the universal mind need to contrive anything? It would just make anything happen. Theoretically, make a square triangle.
Yes, right.
Need to need that person to go out and do that, so that other people will do this, so that other people will do that, so there will be some kind of desired result 1,000 years later. You just do it. So, and I think that's part of the virus, is that it helps people bypass logic, bypass thinking.
Which is the reason it's not susceptible to logic.
That's right. It's going back to
ways,
because it is about emotion, and
it turns off very specific parts of the logic. Except It doesn't turn off logic about other people's religion.
That's right, that's right.
It turns off logic about my religion.
Right.
I can see the Muslim problems. I can't see my Catholic problems if I'm a Catholic.
You know, my memory, I'm having senior moments more often than usual than ever before. But I forgot who made the statement, but it goes along. Paraphrasing goes along. This is that in discussing atheism with a theist, you say, well, if you understand the reason why you reject other religions,
right,
or other gods,
yes,
then you will understand why I reject yours.
Exactly. Right.
But it's the nature of the virus to steer people away from even thinking like that.
Right. You know, there is something I don't. This is a. So in my research, I found that I want to talk a little bit about intelligence and personality. In my research, I found that there's been about 52 different studies since the 1920s on personality, and it's been frustrating in religious research that there's not a lot of correlation between personality characteristics and religiosity, and it's been a puzzle. Why can't we see some correlation between why a person's not religious or not religious and personality? And the God virus, though, helps us understand that more elegantly, I think. And what we start seeing when we break it down is there's roughly 5 main characteristics in personality. The first 4, and I won't go into detail about them, really don't show any correlation. Mm-hmm. The 5th one is openness to new experiences. That's the one that correlates best with religiosity.
Right.
But it's a negative correlation.
Yeah.
The more you're open to new experiences, the less religious you are. The less you open to new experiences, the more religious you are. It's like religion closes the mind down.
Yeah.
Or people who already have closed minds are, who don't like new experiences. Now those people, you could translate those into people who need right, wrong, good, bad, black and white kinds of answers.
Yes.
That's the one correlation that seems to stand up in personality research. Yeah. The other thing that I started understanding, exploring more in the book, The God Virus, is that maybe certain religions have got certain ways of opening up certain personalities.
Yes.
So maybe Mormons are better at opening up certain types of personality characteristics, where Catholics others, or whatever. But I don't know a way to test that right now.
Right.
But the main thing is people get their religion from their parents.
Yes.
Just like they get colds from their family.
Right.
A lot of the disease you get comes right from your own family. So you get that. It's not as important that you get religion somewhere else, because it's the religion that comes from your family that's most important in most cases.
Right.
So personality very much is difficult to see anything, because no matter what your personality, you were still exposed to that same family. You could have 5 different personality types in a family of 5 children. 4 of them be religious and 1 of them won't. Why? I think because that one personality type has got resistant to, maybe they're more open to new experiences than any of the other 4 siblings. That's my hypothesis. Now there's another aspect, and that's intelligence. Intelligence is much easier to research, and there's a lot more on it in many ways. And there's a clear correlation. The more intelligent you are, the less religious you are. The greatest, the highest minds in the world, Nobel Science Prize winners, and the top scientists in the United States, almost all of them are atheists. They're certainly not religious.
But I think it's also true, just to be fair, that there have been very brilliant people who were religious.
Oh yeah, you can. There's all sorts of brilliant people. Jesus was brilliant. He was pretty darn religious. There's no doubt about that. Adolf Hitler was brilliant. You can find brilliance because the bell curve covers any. There's people on each end of the bell curve in religion and outside religion.
Right.
But what the research consistently has shown since the 1920s is that religiosity is a function of intelligence, but it's a negative correlation. So that's pretty interesting. A huge study of 7,000 people in Denmark found that an average atheist or non-believer, whether they call themselves atheists or not, had an IQ of 5.8 points higher than the religious person. Right. Now that's over half a standard deviation. That's pretty big.
Yeah, and I think it's also if you look back in history that even believing religious people, in many cases, certainly in cases of Christian Europe, these people who accomplished great things and made great discoveries it was usually in opposition to their religion.
Oh, yeah, Galileo's the great one. Yeah.
In other words, the religion itself didn't contribute to their brilliance.
No, no.
It was almost in spite of it.
As the great philosopher Bertrand Russell said, there's no praise in the Bible for intelligence.
That's right.
I think he said, I don't recall any praise in the Bible for intelligence.
Right.
But I don't want to be taken wrong here in this discussion, because I'm not saying that religious people are less intelligent.
Right.
What I'm saying is religion suppresses intelligence.
Right.
If you open people up to new experience, if you give them opportunities, or if they take the opportunities, their IQ will probably come back up or go up.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of evidence that religion suppresses intelligence. It's not that intelligent people become religions necessarily.
Well, yeah,
unintelligent.
It isn't. Religion doesn't necessarily have to be anti-intelligent, although I think in some cases, in many cases, it is.
It is, right.
But because, as we have said repeatedly said before, because it's about emotions and not about the intellect and not about facts. Basically, the virus is spread via emotions.
Yeah.
And not via intellect.
Right, right.
And so when you're kind of not steered in the direction of thinking rationally, you're not dealing with a lot of facts, and I guess you can't really. It's not conducive to expressing intelligence.
Well, in the educational process within a religious environment is restrictive. I mean, there's certain things you cannot teach and cannot talk about. If you go to a Baptist school, they're not going to teach you evolution.
Right.
They're not going to teach good principles of evolutionary biology. That's just not going to be a course they're going to teach.
Right. And even
so you're restricted right there.
Yeah, and even in what they do teach, it's like being an expert on Scripture, for instance.
Yeah.
And then there are some people who really are experts on Scripture in all religions. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have a grasp of the real world, an expert in the grasp of the real world. I mean, you could recite you recite the New Testament backwards in Chinese, but that doesn't necessarily make you a
good Christian,
or a rational
right.
person or anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you aren't, but there's nothing I think about. I don't know. I suppose the same could be said about if you learn if you have a doctorate in Celtic literature, that doesn't make you necessarily a good evolutionist either.
No, right.
But I think if you're studying about Celtic literature, not that I'm even vaguely interested in it, but if you're doing it in a secular context, there's nothing about studying Celtic literature that precludes you knowing about anything else,
right,
right. Learning science or anything like that.
Right.
Whereas in certain areas, in certain
if you're a theologian in most areas, you're going to be restricted from making certain statements.
Right.
Now, ironically, the Catholic Church was quite open about evolution.
That's right.
That's the interesting thing.
And
no problem with
mainstream
it
Protestantism as well.
Yeah, right. It's the fundamentalists.
It's the fundamentalists, and I think that's probably.
I don't know if you saw the school board in Texas recently has decided that the Big Bang cannot be taught or referred. They're trying to say the Big Bang cannot be taught or referred to in Texas school districts.
Actually, I'm kind of a member of one of the organizations down there that's combating that.
Oh, okay.
Have donated money to them, and I don't know. There are people who are really fighting the good fight down there in Texas, in Texas, and my hats are off to them. But when the governor recently hinted at the possibility of Texas seceding, I just wanted to beg him and say, please don't go. The brain drain alone will. Look, all those we'll be deprived of all those creation scientists. But
there was something else I didn't get to talk about in the presentation. I thought it was interesting, and that is, where does the money go? Where does the money go?
Follow the money.
Yeah. In I believe it's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has certain guidelines around charitable organizations, and they say that no more than 40% of the dollars you give to an organization should go to marketing, administration, that sort of stuff, and 60% should go to some kind of value-added service.
Yeah, to whatever this. Yeah.
Right. So if you give money to United Way, if you give money to Red Cross, you expect them to follow those guidelines, and they, for the most part, do. There's no such guidelines within a church.
No.
And in the book, I look at the viral metaphor and I say, okay, how does that work? Where does the money go? And if you look at what is the value-added activities that churches engage in.
Right.
Now, I mean, by value-added, I mean something that actually benefits from, it's drilling, helping dig a well in Africa.
Yeah.
It's giving vaccines to children. It's teaching children how to read or do math. Those are value-added because they're going to be able to do something better and improve their lives in the future.
Right.
Reading the Bible is not value-added.
Right.
Giving a Bible tract, going
Right.
to church, none of those are value-added.
Right.
So if you look at what churches do, about 95% of the money you give to a church goes to non-value-added activities. It goes to paying for a church building that nobody uses or very few people use throughout a week, paying for materials that are all religion-oriented, paying a staff salary, and all they're doing is going around proselytizing and preaching. It's not like they're out teaching children how to read, unless, of course, they've got a Bible school, I mean a school attached to the church in that sense. But most religious money, I calculate around 95% of the money goes to non-value-added activities.
Here's a real shocker. Most of the money that went to Mother Teresa didn't go to actually helping the poor of Calcutta.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a real shock.
Huh. But I think this is a challenge to religious people, saying, what are you really doing? They get so excited about the money they give to their church or the mission work that their church is doing. And I'm serious. I watched my parents in their mission work, and I watched how much money they took and did some actual, they had kind of an unusual mission when they were missionaries, but even they found they were doing a lot of non-value-added activity.
Yeah.
But all the missionaries around them, oh, we built this church, we gave this many Bibles out. Yeah, but those kids are starving, and those kids can't read those Bibles.
Right.
So what's the deal? This is non-value-added activity.
Yeah.
Well, even if they could read the Bible, it's not helping them, develop their own business or farm their garden any better.
Well, first of all, one thing, actually, this is a horrible segue, but one thing we can't ignore is that we have come to the end of another show. I feel as though we haven't even gotten started. My guest has been Dr. Darrel W. Ray, who is the author of this book, The God Virus. You can go to thegodvirus.com, I guess. Is that
.net.
.net. Godvirus.net. And thegodvirus.net. And also, he is find out about recovering from religion by going to recoveringreligionist.com. And if you want to start a chapter, you can do that. But I want to thank you, Darrel, very much for taking this extra time and for doing these.